Well, happy Easter, everyone. How we doing? Hey, make no mistake about it. This is probably the most filled this room has ever been, and that's exactly why electricity went out. Honestly, that's not by mistake. I mean, it wasn't planned by us, but we're in a battle, and the last thing the devil wants to see is for resurrection power. So honestly, the thing was, even if the power goes off, it didn't stop. June 30th, 1998. I'm 10 years old. And my best friend, Bobby, his aunt, she won, I think probably gave a significant amount of money to a charity. And because of that, she won an opportunity for 4 people to be a part of the first pitch at the Big A, Angel Stadium. And so Bobby threw out the first pitch, and then he invited me as his best friend. I was the batter. And then I believe his cousin and another friend of ours, they were the umpire and the catcher. And so there I am, 10 years old. I am standing in the batter's box at Angel Stadium. There we go. That's me there with the blue Nike shirt. I just want to point out, I had those are shorts. Those aren't pants. You know what I mean? Like long, baggy shorts. Have times changed, and I get made fun of here for skinny jeans. God does move. So this was a huge deal for me. I mean, I'm 10 years old, I'm still a huge baseball fan, and I get to be in the batter's box at Angel Stadium. I'm holding the bat. It's a bat that the players use. I'm in the box, and they're hitting a home run at the Big A. And about 10 minutes before that scene, literally 10 minutes before the picture that you just saw, I see an older gentleman walking toward us. And you ever out on vacation or at the store or whatever, and you see someone and you're like, ooh, that's a somebody. They just have that aura to them. This is someone famous. Well, as a little 10-year-old boy, that's the feeling that I get. And he's dressed business casual, got the cool sunglasses on, and he's walking toward us. And in the matter of seconds, unexpectedly, this wasn't planned, I wasn't expecting this, he walks right by me, and I say out loud, hey, Hank Aaron! Hank! Now, if you're in here and you don't know who Hank Aaron is, I can tell by maybe the lack of response that that's probably true of the majority of us in here. Hank Aaron, by most accounts, not to get controversial this morning, if you remove steroids and Barry Bonds, Hank Aaron is the all-time home run leader in baseball history. Over 700 home runs. And I say in my little 10-year-old voice, Hank! And he pauses. Takes off the sunglasses. Son, I'm not Hank Aaron. Before I go anymore, let me show you. Man, it's so cool. This picture was snapped of the scene. So there he is. That's who I thought Hank Aaron was. And he says, son, do you know who I am? I don't even answer because I thought you were Hank Aaron, but apparently you're not Hank Aaron. He says, I'm Frank Robinson. All right, so we do have some baseball fans in here. So Frank Robinson is also a baseball legend. With steroids, Frank didn't take steroids, they didn't exist back then, but Frank is number 10 on the all-time home run career list. He's in the Hall of Fame. If it weren't for steroids, he'd probably be number 7, maybe number 6 or something. He's got 586 career home runs. Frank Robinson is a baseball legend. And I called him Hank Aaron. I misidentified an all-time great. That was about as embarrassing and awkward and kind of like a you can't make this story up. Here's the ironic thing, though. Though I misidentified him for Hank Aaron, in some sense, I was still right. Baseball, Hall of Famer, tons and tons of home runs. Yes, I was wrong, but in some ways I was right. He's still a baseball legend with a ton of home runs, and in some ways I was complimenting him. I would love to be mistaken for Hank Aaron. Did you know that 2,000 years ago on this Easter morning, the risen Jesus was misidentified? Let that sink in. This is the stuff you can't make up. The resurrected Jesus is mistaken for someone else. The original Easter story isn't like this hyped up, embellished narrative. It's actually quite awkward. When you read the scenes, I would imagine some of you did that this past week, or maybe you'll go home and do it today. One of the things you'll notice about all the resurrection scenes is that there's not an explanation given to them. It's actually more so like we're just seeing the raw footage. And it's clumsy, it's awkward. So here's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to open up to John chapter 20. If you don't have a Bible, totally cool. We got one for you. They're underneath the chairs. They're orange. They're free. Take it home if you want. I'll be on page 741. So John chapter 20, verse 1. If you're new to church, or if you've never been to church before, you don't know who this Jesus guy is, there are 4 biographies in the Bible that chronicle for us the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And John is one of those 4. And so I want us to look at this original Easter morning 2,000 years ago. John 20, verse 1, here we go. Early on, the first day of the week, and I'm going to tell you this morning that phrase might be the most important phrase in this passage. So remember that. While it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Now skip down to verse 9. This is kind of like a side commentary that we read. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. And real quick, let me just pause there. 2 things that I think we often forget in Easter. First, nobody expected Jesus to rise from the dead. We read that in verse 9. They didn't understand it. The disciples didn't have on their radar, oh, yeah, come Sunday morning, he's going to rise from the dead. No. That's not what they were expecting. Actually, any good Jewish disciple in the first century, what they expected is this: that when God would come back to restore and rescue his people, there would be a resurrection of everyone at once when God would come back. They didn't have the language they didn't expect for Jesus. First of all, they had no conception of a crucified Messiah. But they didn't expect Jesus to be resurrected by himself, isolated from everyone else's resurrection. And so Easter morning for them isn't like getting up early, excited, expected, oh, let me get all my Peeps, marshmallow bunnies, stuff my mouth, go do the Easter egg hunt, and then, oh, yeah, we'll go find the tomb empty because we know Jesus is supposed to be resurrected. No. Actually, we know that they were grieving, crying, fearful. That's the mood of Easter morning. And so when Mary, along with some other women, they go to the tomb that early morning and they bring spices because they're going to anoint Jesus' dead, buried body. And they get there and they don't say, oh, well, of course he's not here. No, what's their first response? Who stole his body? They're not expecting him to be alive. Here's the second thing you got to know about this awkward, clumsy story. And the women are going to love this. In the first century, women, they were not credible witnesses in the courtroom. Meaning, people didn't trust female testimonies. Now, that's bad news. Isn't it ironic that in the resurrection narratives, who are the first people to discover the tomb is empty and that Jesus is risen? Women. Now, if you're here and you're a skeptic, let me tell you this. If this is a made-up fantasy story, and the goal is to persuade people that Jesus is resurrected from the dead, the last thing you would do is include stories of women being the first ones to discover the empty tomb and then claiming shockingly that Jesus is alive. You would not include that. It would work against you. People would read the stories and be like, well, yeah, women, they're not credible in the courtroom, so yeah, I don't believe your story. That is the exact opposite what the earliest followers of Jesus say. Women are the first ones to discover him. That tips us off right away that this isn't just a hokey-pokey fantasy story. We're just seeing raw footage. Verse 11. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. Again, she thinks Jesus' body is stolen by a thief. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. Verse 13, they asked her, woman, why are you crying? She says, they've taken my Lord away. And she said, I don't know where they've put him. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. And here is the fantastic irony of Jesus of Nazareth, that he's a quite humorous individual. Jesus asked her, woman, why are you crying? He has the nerve to ask this, who are you looking for? I mean, quite the scene. And here it is, the greatest misidentification in the history of the world. Thinking he was the gardener. It's okay to laugh in church. And she goes on, sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will get him. Jesus said to her, Mary. She heard his voice. She turned towards him, and in Aramaic, she cried out, Rabboni, teacher, master, Lord. Verse 18, Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. And check it out. Verse 19, here's that phrase for the second time. On the evening of that first day of the week. Why is that there? When the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, they're scared, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. And after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Mary mistakes the risen Jesus for a gardener. You can't make this up. I mean, we want to say, like, are you okay, Mary? Like, what'd you do the night before? How crazy is that? Did you know that gardeners in the first century world were part of the poorest class of society? What in the world is going on here? Again, if this is mere fiction and fantasy, you wouldn't include this in the first story and witness of the resurrected Jesus. Why? Because A, it's embarrassing for Mary, and B, it's actually embarrassing for Jesus. And so you read this story, and at least for me, this is what it makes me step back, pause, and ask, okay, is there something deeper going on here? Is John, the author of this biography, trying to tell us something? When I called Frank Robinson Hank Aaron, of course I was wrong. I was a dumb, ignorant 10-year-old little boy. But I did identify something correct in Mr. Robinson, in that he was a somebody, and he hit lots of home runs. Could it be that Mary, though she is wrong to identify the resurrected Jesus as a gardener, could it be that perhaps there is some truth in it? See, I'm actually under the impression that these accounts of the risen Jesus, they're not just true, they are true, they're more than true. These are actually brilliant pieces of literature that I think have layers of significance and symbolism behind them that we're still discovering thousands of years later. I think John is trying to tell us something that will blow your mind and forever change your life this morning. Are you ready for it? I've been excited for a couple weeks to share this. Here's the clue to it all. John has written his biography of Jesus in a framework that he wants us to catch. Check this out. Go with me on a ride now. How does John start his book? John 1:1, chapter 1, verse 1. Here's what we read. In the beginning was the Word. The Word is just a name for Jesus, all right? So in the beginning was Jesus. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus, he was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Let's stop. Any first century Jewish person, Jesus was thoroughly Jewish. He was a rabbi. They would have heard the three words, in the beginning, and it would have sent off alarms and triggers in their mind. It would have taken them immediately back to Genesis 1:1. Genesis is the very first book in the Bible. Chapter 1, verse 1. The very first three words in the Bible, we'll put it up, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. John 1:1, Genesis 1:1. This is no accident, brothers and sisters. Both start off with, in the beginning. If you were a Jewish person and you were hearing John's story being read out loud, which is how they didn't have written scriptures yet, they would have heard the beginning of John 1:1 and immediately gone back to the creation story in Genesis. We're just getting going. John, this is a clue right away that John wants us to read his book with Genesis 1 in mind. Now, I don't got time to read it. I'll save you some time and not bore you. Genesis 1 and 2. Most people know this. God creates the world in 7 days, in 1 week. All right? Now, if you're here, don't get caught up in, does the Hebrew word yod there, day, does it mean a literal 24 hours or is it metaphorical? That's not the point. So don't get caught up in that. The point is that there is a God who's created this world systematically in a week, in 7 days. Let's look at 2 of those days. Friday, day 6. What happens? There we go. God makes human beings on day 6, on Friday, and he says, behold, here are humans made in my image, just like me, just like God. What happens the next day on day 7? What does God do on day 7? This is great. He rests. Who here likes to rest? Yes. My wife and I wish we had more of that. We only have 2 toddlers right now. So, Friday, day 6, God creates human beings made in the image of God. The next day, Saturday, day 7, God rests. Okay, check this out. In the book of John, there are 7 signs. All scholars admit this. There are 7 signs in the whole narrative of the book of John. Let me give you some examples. Hang with me here. These signs are like miracles or significant events. The first one, chapter 2, Jesus turns water into wine. We like that one. Chapter 6, he multiplies loaves of bread. Chapter 9, he heals a blind man. John is telling us, hey, there's a creation week in the book of John, and it's alluding and comparing to Genesis 1 and 2. So let's ask this now. What happens on Friday, day 6 in the book of John? Chapter 19, verse 5. Let's turn there. We'll put it up on the screen. Pilate, the Roman governor. Here's what Pilate says about Jesus on Good Friday, the 6th day of the week. When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to him, here is the human one. Here is the man. What happens the next day on day 7 in John's book? Guesses? Jesus is resting in the tomb. Genesis 1 and 2, day 6, Friday, behold, human beings made in God's image. Day 7, Saturday, God rests. In the book of John, day 6, Jesus on the cross, behold, the man. The next day, asleep in the tomb. I don't think this is accidental. There is an emerging theme that John wants to tell us about. And he's comparing his whole book to the first week of creation. There's a slide I want to show you to break this all down, make this a little bit more obvious. So I'm just comparing the 2 books here. Genesis on the left, first book in the Bible, John, the book I'm in right now. They both start off with in the beginning. Genesis has a 7-day creation week. John has 7 signs. Day 6 in Genesis, God creates humans. Day 6 in John, Pilate says, behold, the man. Day 7, God rests. John, Jesus rests in the garden. Genesis, the whole thing happens in a garden. Where's the empty tomb? In a garden. Genesis, first human being, Adam. Adam's vocation is to be a gardener, to steward and take care of the Garden of Eden. Who does Mary mistake Jesus to be? Genesis, the first week of creation. Brothers and sisters, there's an 8th sign in the book of John, and it is that the tomb is empty and that Jesus is alive. And it's not just the 8th sign. It's the first day of the new week. Here's the point, John is structuring his whole biography as a comparison to the week of creation in Genesis 1 and 2. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, dude, why did you just nerd out on us? There's a lot of information. I really wrestled with sharing all this with you because from a communication standpoint, I probably lost some people. Here's why. The resurrection of Jesus is the start of the new week of creation. The resurrection of Jesus is God launching his project to restore and fix and redeem everything gone wrong in the first week of creation. What Adam was supposed to do as the first human, but he failed to do because of sin, Jesus is the new and better Adam, the ultimate gardener who's fixing the garden. The resurrection is the climax of the story of the Bible, and it starts in a garden and it's fixed with an empty tomb in the garden. Remember, I told you. Little meaningless phrase there, John 21 and verse 19. How does the resurrection story begin? Early on the first day of the week. Why bother include such a mundane detail? And then he says it again, verse 19, on the evening of the first day of the week. If something is repeated in the Bible, it's there on purpose to emphasize it. Easter, the resurrection of Jesus, is the 8th sign in this book, or better yet, it's the first day of the new week. The one who created this world in 6 days and rested on the 7th is now, through the risen Jesus, he's starting to recreate, restore, redeem his creation. It's a new week and it's time for new creation. The Apostle Paul puts it this way, 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, new creation has come. The old is gone. The new is here. A modern translation puts it this way. What we see is that anyone united with the Messiah gets a fresh start, is created new. The old life is gone and the new life emerges. If Sunday ain't coming, Sunday's here. Now, in case you think that I've just had way too many Peep marshmallows to eat while forming this sermon, which I did not. I don't like Peeps marshmallows. The leading New Testament scholar in the world, his name is N.T. Wright. If you're ever bored, if you ever want to fall asleep at night, he's written an 800-page book just on the resurrection of Jesus. Right? So 800 pages, go read it. Thankfully, for us not as smart people like me, he's written a condensed book called Surprised by Hope. You should read it. Here's what he says. John 20 stresses twice in verses 1 and 19 that Easter is the first day of the new week. John has so ordered his gospel that the sequence of 7 signs, climaxing in the cross of Jesus on the 6th day of the week and his resting in the tomb on the 7th, functions as the week of the old creation. And now Easter functions as the beginning of the new creation. The word through whom all things were made is now the word through whom all things are remade. Jesus' resurrection is to be seen as the beginning of the new world, the first day of the new week, the unveiling of the prototype of what God is now going to accomplish in the rest of the world. So, let's bring this full circle. Did she really misidentify Jesus as a gardener? Or perhaps, without her not even realizing it, she identified the risen Jesus as the grand and ultimate gardener who restores and fixes everything gone wrong in that first garden. And I imagine Jesus looking deeply into Mary's eyes in this scene and saying, Mary, do you recognize my voice? And Mary at that point, she gets it. And she says, Rabbi, teacher, master, Lord, God. Thomas, a couple of verses later in this, same thing happens to him, and he says, my Lord and my God. We may think it's an odd story or perhaps embarrassing for Mary, but I think you and I, 2,000 years later on Easter Sunday, I think we misidentified Jesus too. Here's what I want to ask you this morning. Who do you often misidentify Jesus for? Who do you misidentify Jesus for? I would submit that this is the most important question that you can ever ask yourself. The way you answer that question will change the trajectory of your life. Broadly speaking, if I can, I think there are maybe two groups of people in this room. Let me talk to the first. Maybe you're here, you don't follow this Jesus, you've been hurt by the church, you're skeptical of Jesus, you think it's all magic tricks or something. And maybe you're here and you only came because there's like a free egg hunt afterwards, or you come every year because grandma makes you come, whatever. And I just want to say, we're so glad you're here. There's no pressure. Honestly, we're just stoked that you're here. But if I can, my guess is that in your mind, you may be thinking this about Jesus. This whole risen Jesus guy, he's outdated. He's not relevant. And let me, if I can, just say, well, for 2,000 years, billions of humans across the globe have claimed that he's alive, and he's radically changed their lives. Or maybe you're here, he's not active anymore. God can't be involved in my life. Well, if I can, let me just say, Jesus is still in the business of redeeming lives. And you saw some of those testimonies, and you will in a couple minutes with baptisms. Maybe you're here, Jesus, he's just kind of some like pushover, peace-loving, religious hippie. And if he was here today, he would drive a Volkswagen van or something. Jesus is called the pure Lamb of God in the scriptures. He does have a gentle and calm and soft spirit to him. But Jesus is also called the roaring Lion of Judah, who devoured the greatest enemy to ever live, death itself. Maybe you're here, Jesus is a buzzkill. He wants to make people feel guilty and have shame, and this whole talk of the S-word, sin. But what if Jesus is the one who actually took your sin, your guilt, your shame, and said, you don't need to experience that, I'll take it. Let me give you my innocence. And then I think maybe the second group here this morning, you follow Jesus. You're here all the time. I think there's still a temptation to still misidentify Jesus. Some of us here who claim Jesus, I think we often identify the risen Jesus as kind of like a genie who's here to grant us our preferred good wishes. But check this out. The risen Jesus is far more interested in taking the betrayal and rejection that you face on a Thursday, the suffering and isolation that you feel on a Friday, and the silence that you feel on a Saturday, and turning that into the resurrection that you can feel on a Sunday. Some of us have mistaken Jesus as just a Band-Aid for a quick fix. I don't like this in my life. I'll get a little Jesus on me. But the risen Jesus knows that a Band-Aid, that's not enough for the real problem. You and I need heart surgery. We need a new life. That is what we celebrate this morning. And some of us actually misidentified Jesus as kind of like financial security. If I go to church, I'll live a blessed life. He'll give me good things. And let me just say this. Jesus isn't interested in your financial security. He's far more interested in your eternal security now. So right now, Easter morning, 2,000 years ago, Jesus calls out Mary's name. Jesus is here today through the Holy Spirit, and he's calling out your name. Danny. Bob. Mark. The question is, will you respond like Mary? N.T. Wright sums up Easter this way. The message of Easter is that God's new world has been unveiled in Jesus Christ, and you are now invited to belong to it. What God did to Jesus that Easter morning, he wants to do to you. The invitation for the bridge and the invitation for you individually is that Jesus invites us to be an Easter person in a Good Friday world. His resurrection throws open before you the opportunity to experience new creation and restoration over all the junk, crud, dysfunction, toxicity, and sin and brokenness that we know that you don't have to stay that way. Something new can come out. That is the invitation this morning. And it's just the question of how do you respond to the empty tomb? That's it. So here's what we're going to do this morning. I'm going to invite the worship team back up. Pastor Dan, and we're going to have some people getting baptized this morning. The climax of our service here at the Bridge is baptizing people on Easter Sunday, and here's why. Because there, historically for 2 millennium, there is not a better picture, a more powerful symbol of someone dying with Christ and then resurrecting with him out of the waters. That is what baptism is. You're going to hear stories from real people who've encountered the risen Jesus saying their name, Chris. Man, Chris is one of the guys getting baptized. I met Chris over a year ago. Chris's life is radically changed because he met the risen Jesus. And so we're going to celebrate what Jesus has done in these baptisms, and it really is a celebration. Like, we need you to clap when they come up out of the waters. That is symbolically them coming out of the tomb, if you will. Aaron and the team, they're going to lead us in some music. We're going to try something new this morning that we haven't done before, and we're going to sing and do baptisms kind of all in the same. So there'll be words up on the screen. You sing those, and then we just celebrate the power of Jesus. And so as you hear these stories, I want to leave you with this question, and we're going to come back to it in about 5 minutes. What in your life needs to experience resurrection? What's broken in your life? Where does there need to be renewal? The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is offered to you this morning. How will you respond? Let's celebrate baptisms.